started, so thanks for waiting a couple minutes for us. We are going to cover our new version 4.5 today. So we're going to talk about elevating IT operations with Bacon Unlimited 4.5. Mostly focusing around our mastering third-party patching, which creates a huge amount of new automation capabilities and ease of management. So hopefully you'll get a lot of benefit out of that. Well, let's start out with some introductions, Dave, if you wouldn't mind flipping the slide there. My name is John Marcato, and I am one of the co-founders of Bacon Unlimited and also the CTO. And my face is about to pop up. There it goes.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Joining me today is Dave Adekoya, one of our senior engineers, and who is a fantastic demo expert. So he's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting today. But I'm going to start it out, and we're going to do a little of the boring stuff as quickly as possible, a little housekeeping, and then I'll kind of just give a quick overview of the product for those who haven't seen it before. And then Dave's going to do like the real demo, because we like to focus mostly on giving you eyes on the actual product. So housekeeping parts. Oh, I think you went one too quick there, Dave. We're going to use this webinar product called GoToWebinar. So if you haven't used it before, there is a place to ask questions. I highly recommend using it. We'll be answering those questions in the background. And additionally, please do participate in the polls. We want to guide the conversation towards what your level of interest is in certain areas. And so we're going to do a couple quick polls at the beginning. And then lastly, at the end, we have a survey. We always leave time at the end because we really do appreciate your feedback. And we want to give you one of our super awesome Bacon Flavor Force BFF t-shirts. They are very, very soft and comfortable to wear. As I was telling Dave yesterday, they comprise much of my wardrobe now. So that's kind of the housekeeping stuff. And why don't we move on and just start, oh, that's right, one more thing of housekeeping. We do also have a YouTube channel with a huge amount of data on it. We are constantly updating our Bacon Bits videos. They can be used to sort of understand different features that you might care about, but also a lot of our customers use them for training because they are short and easy to understand and really explain kind of the thought behind particular features and so forth. So there's 100 and some odd videos on there. It's pretty helpful. All right. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what Bacon is. And so if you if this is your first time seeing it, this should be helpful just to get you on the same page with us in terms of what it does and why we're here. So the big thing for Bacon was that it was designed because the endpoint management and sort of MDM space, which all kind of converge and there's a bunch of different marketing terms you may have heard for those things: MDM, endpoint management, universal endpoint management. What really matters is what you can control and how you can control it and how securely you can do all of those things. So Bacon was designed to be a very security-focused platform in this space because it was really designed by a bunch of sysadmins who did not want to deal with the older tools because of all their problems and security issues and things like that. So that's where it was born a little over about 5.5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And it's cross-platform, so it works with Mac, Linux, and Windows. It also actually works with Apple mobile devices, which could be particularly handy in times. And it's known sort of for having a very intuitive interface. It's very easy to learn. You can learn Bacon sort of the first day you get it, about 80% of it without ever opening the admin guide or anything like that. So what does it do for you once you've got this nice secure endpoint management platform? Well, it kind of covers 3 areas: visibility, control, and automation. So it visualizes all the things that are on your machines, servers, workstations, laptops, iPhones, iPads, Apple TVs. It's going to tell you what hardware is on them. It's going to tell you what software is on them. And it's also going to do that in near real time. So that's one of the big differentiators with Bacon with some other platforms that are out there, like an Intune or something like that, where Not that Intune's a bad tool, but it has some big limitations in terms of how quickly jobs can get done, not really knowing when things will get done, and not knowing if your information in the portal is kind of up to date, also somewhat limited and not customizable. So Bacon kind of takes care of a lot of those things, and a lot of people use it in concert with Intune. Sometimes they've kind of got Intune as part of their package in the Windows world, and so they use it with that. And I actually can admit that we actually like a couple of features of Intune too, related to sort of security stuff in Azure AD. So not a bad complementary tool in that respect. So the main kind of things that it covers are doing installation. So that could be patching, it could be third-party software patching, which we're definitely going to be talking about today. We talk about profiles, which is our word for controlling all the different states of everything on every machine. So if you, in the MDM world, they use that term profiles, but we do it two different ways. We do it with MDM type technology, and we also do it more with a CLI-based or agent-based technology that controls all of these different aspects, and it really gives you a huge amount of power to make sure that everything on your machines are exactly the way you want, and that you get visibility back from that. In other words, you know whether or not everything is the way it's supposed to be. So the visibility part is huge. We do have monitoring as well. And then the control part is being able to install things, patch things, script things, any kind of software that you need to get on there, it can do all of that. And then the automation really is in a bunch of different areas, but mainly in that profiles area where you can consistently have things rolling out automatically based on dynamic rules called dynamic groups for machines. And so there's just a huge amount of power in it. And then lastly, it's got a nice remote control feature, which was not something that we had put it in originally, but we realized it was so nice to have the remoting tool built in that we designed one in that's all HTML5 WebSockets based, and it's really integrates very well, so that you kind of, when you have a problem, you can immediately kind of get into the machine and do what you need to do. In those instances where you can't do things in a massive way, you patch 500 machines and 2 fail. Well, sometimes you got to go do surgery and figure out what happened on those machines. So that's kind of what Bacon is, and I think I usually almost don't go to the next slide because I explained most of it on this one, but Dave, maybe just advance it for fun here before I flip it over to you. So the question is why? Well, I hope I helped to start answering that on the last slide. I think one of the things that comes up a lot is, what are the outcomes, right? What are the goals, and then what are the outcomes on those goals when you have a tool like this? Well, you can meet tons of security controls and know that they're continuously being met. So not just for the day of an audit, but in an ongoing way that you stay in an auditable state. Knowing that all of the important security settings that you care about, that your encryption is turned on, that your specific antivirus that you care about is on the machines that you want them to be on, which I hope is all of them, and that it's running, right? It doesn't just matter that it's there, it matters that it works. So we're checking for all of those kinds of things and making it easy for you to check on those things, allowing you to alert on those things, to customize the monitoring and alerting. And so what are these outcomes we're looking for? Well, we're looking for productivity out of end users, and we're looking to secure our corporate end users and data, right? And that's what Bacon is all about. A lot of people don't think about the fact that there are a lot of assets in an IT infrastructure, firewalls and switches and endless kinds of data and network access points and all those kinds of things. But usually the most sensitive things in an environment are the sort of flexible operating systems, and that's workstations, laptops, and servers, because you can install kind of anything on them. So that's the area that we decided to focus on because we felt that there wasn't a good enough software solution, and we think that those kinds of outcomes are really important for businesses and really important for IT departments to be able to control. So with that, Dave, I think I've spieled on enough. Hopefully everybody's not asleep and they're ready to watch you take them through some of the cool stuff we've had for a while and also the new stuff. But before we do, why don't we just jump in and do a couple quick polls? Lane, I know you're on the line, and if you wouldn't mind firing off the first poll, we'll get some feedback here from the crowd. All right, what operating systems do you support? Well, Mac OS, iOS, Linux, and Windows, we cover all of those. So would love to know what you guys feel out there and girls feel out there in the world about, what's kind of crushing you the most. So far, this is an unusual day. We've got a lot of Mac people on, and even Linux is coming in second, and iOS is there? Oh no, Windows. Now everybody's got it on there. So 100% everybody's got Windows, but half of the people have Mac and a third have Linux and roughly a third have iOS. So that is absolutely a lot. So that's great. Why don't we run the second poll as well here? Which features are you most excited about seeing in today's demo? So I kind of mentioned that we're definitely going to cover third-party patching, but we want to know how much you care about these other two things, and Dave can go into some depth on them if they matter. Apple Volume Purchase Program is something that we added significant amount of capability to. So for anybody using Apple Business Manager and using those, volume purchased apps, we've got very rich integration now. And then single sign-on support for Azure AD and Okta, pretty exciting. It looks like third-party patching is still the winner and single sign-on second, kind of a small group. Only about 7% on for the volume purchase program, Dave, but let's make sure to cover it so that those people get a good sense for what we've got there.
Yeah, no worries.
That's great. So I really appreciate everybody filling that out. Again, just want to remind you to ask questions in the toolbar there. There's actually a question section. It drops down, and you can just start typing in there, and we'll answer that for you and for the crowd. But I think with that, Dave, if you're ready, you can take over and start taking us through the system. I think that would be great for everybody.
All right, good stuff. So to start off with here, we're going to start by covering some of those newer features in our 4.5 build. The first one we're going to start with is logging in through SSO. So I have a couple different environments here. We're using our beta server. I've configured our SSO, and I want to show you how that login works. So I'll click login here. Then it's going to redirect me to the Microsoft side so I can authenticate. Type my username, password. See if the two-factor works for us this time. So far, so good. Then once I've authenticated, it's going to redirect me back to Bacon. It's going to log me in using the same account that I have in here with the same email address. So that's just one really nice feature we've been able to add here, just so your users can have a little bit less passwords to remember, which is always nice. Except, like John was saying, we do have Apple VPP support. So that's actually over here under software, where we're able to load in all the assets that you have configured, and that's the rich ABM integration that we have. So here we can see various apps that we've loaded in. We can see our licenses, what's available, what's already been assigned. Then it also breaks out our users and our devices here. So we can then add licenses by device or add licenses by user, depending on what your needs are. In addition to that, in a similar app focus, we also have third-party patching. So I'll bounce over to this environment here, and we'll kind of cover how that works. So under our repository, if you've seen Bacon before, there is a new option called Managed Packages. This allows us to pull from our Managed Package repository. That's a repo that we take care of, we maintain, and it basically scans all of these different publicly available apps and finds the latest version, gets all the install strings for you and stuff like that. Keep in mind, we have 100 here. This is also a list that can be added to. So you'd simply submit a support ticket, then our engineers will go out, find the site, get it into the engine, and then it'll also be updated for everybody who's using this feature as well. So as you can see here, we have the different packages available. Then once we choose to manage it, and you can see here all these are managed with this little green indicator, it's going to download the latest package to our Bacon repository. Then we've also added a feature to create a state here. This allows you to then automatically push this out to your machine. So I can push out one password to a group of machines, and it's going to take care of figuring out, is it the old version? Does it need to be updated? And then I can have this run, let's say, once an hour, or maybe like once every 4 hours, right? That way my machines are always up to date with the latest packages that I need to support. In addition, for some more new features, we've also added an outage option for our monitoring. So previously you can set up monitors, or you can set up rules, excuse me, and those can trigger alerts. However, there are some known situations where you're going to have an outage, or even emergency ones. So we've added outages here, and this is targeted by group. So in this case, I've set up this outage to target my East Coast Factory Network group during this time frame. And so no matter what, during that time frame, it's not going to trigger any alerts for me for anything in that group. That allows us to be a little bit more flexible and more intelligent about how our alerts come through. The last thing you want to do is train your staff to ignore alerts. That's never a good policy. So outages are going to be very useful for that, for both planned and emergency scenarios. And lastly, the other features we have to show here aren't necessarily things that are visual. So in the latest version of Bacon, we've improved our ability to uninstall software on Windows. It's kind of like a moving goalpost scenario where a lot of those different installers in Windows leave information in different places. And so we've been able to come in here and update our logic for how uninstalls work, making these much more robust. In addition, on the back end of things, we previously had LDAP support. We now also support LDAP-S. So again, just some incremental changes, but they're pretty meaningful to those who are using those features. So with that, I think we've covered all the new stuff that we want to show off in 4.5. How about we just go through a standard Bacon demo? What I'll do here is I'm going to walk down the nav bar, this nav bar on the left-hand side, and kind of cover all the features that we have. So we'll start off with the overview. This is where you land when you first log into Bacon. It's got a couple different widgets I like to point out. So we have our alerts widget. That's where we're looking before the monitoring and the outages tab. This is where we can see all of the alerts that have been generated by those custom created rules. That can be things like this machine's offline, this service isn't running, or I also have profile rules that allows me to report back on configurations. Things such as I need to disable all USB ports and this machine didn't have that configuration. Or excuse me, disable all USB removable devices. I mean, you could do ports if you want, but really the target is just getting rid of flash drives and stuff like that. We can do that. We can do things for firewalls. So I want all of my firewalls to have this configuration across, a certain group of servers. And maybe a server's found not to have that config and had to be fixed. It'll generate an alert here. Next up, I have endpoints. So which of my endpoints are online versus offline? We've also added a warning indicator. So in the rare chance we have a problem, in this case, we're seeing the endpoint is online, but we're not getting inventory data back. This is a notice to you as an admin to go in there and maybe reinstall the agent or see if there's like a port communication error, because we know it's there, but we're not getting any like actual data, like what software is installed, how are the services, stuff like that. Next up, I have distribution. This shows me what operating systems I have in my environment. So where have I installed my agent? Then I can see patches. This is showing me how many patch jobs I can deploy. So in this case, packages for Ubuntu or just patches for Windows. Then I can see antivirus protection. This shows me which of my devices are running the AV service of my choice or services. In Bacon, rather than having a list of predefined AV that I'll try to auto detect, we allow you to actually go in there and select any number of your own services. So let's say if you're running SentinelOne and you hire a company who's using CrowdStrike, you can actually select both of those services and they'll contribute to this metric here so you can make sure that not only is a service installed, but it's currently running and that machine's being protected. Then lastly, another similar security focus, encrypted hard drives. This indicator here will track if any machines are using BitLocker on Windows or macOS using FileVault. So we kind of covered some monitoring, but let's take a look at the rest of it. So here are our rules. As I said before, these can be either profile rules, which are individual configurations we're reporting back on, or they can be the standard ones like performance indicators for CPU. We have things for like patch count, so how many patches you have available, as well as patch age, which would be how old is the oldest patch. Maybe you've got like a tolerance for 21 days. So once it hits 21 or more, you'll get a rule triggered for that machine that hits 21 or more. Additionally, we have alerts here. So once a rule is triggered, it's going to generate an alert. Now we have integration with Jira and Autotask over API, as well as all of our rules can be sent to emails or a number of emails. So even if your ticketing system isn't in that list, we can still send you an alert, or excuse me, an email whenever an alert is raised and whenever it is either corrected or dismissed. I'll skip outages since we just saw it. And lastly, for monitoring, we have our knock dashboard. This gives you a visual indicator of the health of your environment. So it's going to trigger if we have excessive patches or if any of those critical alerts have triggered, right? And we can also filter based on what we'd like to see here. Healthy warning, maybe machines that are offline will get filtered out, things like that. Now keep in mind, as I'm navigating the UI, one thing about Bacon is that most things can be interacted with. So you can see the highlight here. If I click on this, it's going to lead me to that device page, as well as most of these green links you're seeing. These are also our version of like a hyperlink. These will lead you to different parts of the product as well. So on the endpoint side, let's take a look at that table. So the endpoints table contains a lot of information we're pulling back about these machines. If I look in columns here, I can see we're pulling back things like host name, right? Pretty standard. IP address. If there's multiple, it'll have them comma separated like we see here with the Bacon Ubuntu machine. So it'll list as many IPs as you have, and those can be searched for. As well, things like serial number, right? That's always good to have, especially if the machine's not accessible and you're just looking up warranty claims or trying to figure out, unique machines from others. Then keep in mind, most tables in Bacon can be exported. So I can go to actions and export all those different items that we were seeing before. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to filter this table a little bit, and we're going to look for just devices that are online. It's actually not equal to disconnected here. Then I want to only look at the Windows devices for this one. So I'll say if my OS platform is equal to Windows. So here I can see, whoops, that's the not equals. Let's fix this. Here, there we go. I can see my Windows devices that are currently online. You can tell because this green indicator on the left-hand side, or if we scroll to the right a bit, there's a larger status indicator right here that tells us they're online. So let's take a look at an individual endpoint page. So here I have 8 different tiles. As I click these, it's going to change the context of the screen below it. So on the system information side, I see similar data to what we saw on the table before, but I also have information on CPU and RAM utilization. I have the option of adding tags, either by typing in new ones or choosing from custom ones already created. I can add any kind of notes, and these will be shared across the product, so any notes and tags I'm using here, you'll see as well. On the left-hand side, we can see some more data. On the previous table, we saw things like the OS, but now we can see the CPU model. We can also see the memory utilization. So what memory they're using versus what's their total capacity, stuff like that. Then as I pick different cards here, we can see disks. So if I have any encrypted disks, they would have a little lock icon up here. And if I had BitLocker or Firewall keys, those would be escrowed here for me to pull. On the network side, we can see we have one interface active. This will also catch things like virtual adapters or tap adapters for VPNs. So any kind of interfaces they have, we'll be able to see here and see the MAC address, the IP address, and everything like that. On the policies page, this is actually where we see what states and what profiles have been pushed to this machine. Again, kind of think of profiles similar to GPOs. They have a similar function, but they're a little bit more flexible. We can also see what groups this machine's a member of. So in Bacon, we have both static and dynamic groups. Static groups are exactly what you think, where you will add machines to a group and it stays that way until an admin modifies it. Dynamic groups allow us to use those filters we saw in the endpoint table before, and we can filter for, let's say, all online Windows devices. And as those online Windows machines come online, they will add to this group. When they go offline, they'll be removed from this group all automatically. Next up, I can see the installed software on the machine. And I also have a column here on the right of number of endpoints. This shows me which endpoints have the same software and version as this one. So even though I'm only looking at one machine, I do get a little bit of insight into the rest of my environment through that column. Here you can see the available patches for this machine. I am going to cover how patching works in just a moment, but I'll use the larger global patching menu. Just keep in mind that any of the steps I go through to patch 10 machines will still apply to one machine. It's the same exact UI, same flow. Next, for services, we can see which services are running, which have been stopped. As I mentioned earlier, our AV tracker can be activated here by marking these as antivirus. So it's super simple. If I mark these as AV here, it'll mark it product-wide, and then Bacon will continue monitoring this service on any machines and make sure it's running for you and report if it's not. Lastly, over here for logs, we can see any kind of work that was being done on the machine. So if I'm deploying software or if we're deploying patches or there's profiles occurring on this machine, those will all be logged here along with the status of that job. In this case, it doesn't have any recent deployments, but we'll kind of see how that looks towards the end of the demo when we go through the logs pane. Then last, I don't want to leave the endpoints table without looking at our remote. So Bacon does have a remote built in as part of your license. You can choose to install it. I believe our installer does it automatically by default. And this gives you screen control. So I can connect here and we can see what's on the user screen. Right, pretty standard stuff. In the bottom left, we have your keyboard controls. So Control Delete, Windows key L, stuff like that. We have the option of pushing and pulling the clipboard, as well as my preferred method, which is just type directly. So this allows you to enter, let's say, passwords or even like bits of code, and it's going to bypass the user's clipboard because Windows 10 and above, they do have a built-in clipboard manager, and I don't want to risk leaving a password on there, something users shouldn't have access to after my remote session. In the bottom right, we also have options for remote chat. So we can actually open a chat on our side that'll open a chat on their side as well. And that's available before we even connect. So you can talk to the user and make sure they're okay to connect or that they're present. Then in the top right, we have settings. This controls our bandwidth. So we can change the streaming quality, make it really crunchy, but also lower the amount of bandwidth, or we can have it near pixel perfect at 90%, as well as adjusting frame rate as well. Then lastly, up here, we have some creature comforts. So if they're using any kind of different screen orientations or some different resolutions, we have different methods to scale that so you can see what's on the screen in different ways. Next up, we have our shell remote. This is usually my favorite remote, if I'm being honest with you. It's a fully featured shell, so that's kind of nice. So here's an example. I can open up PowerShell. Then I can set a variable and pull back the result of that variable, and basically use PowerShell as you usually would. Nice thing here is that this is fully featured, so we can copy and paste. If we have any kind of loading bars or kind of like CLI GUIs, think like HTOP on Linux, those will show up here as well. Then lastly, we have our file system. This allows you to upload and download files, as well as create folders, zip files, things like that. And the last two, shell and file system, are invisible to the user. So you can log in here, it runs a system, and so you can get a bunch of work done without having to bug the user every time to borrow their mouse and close their Excel spreadsheet, stuff like that. Before we get too far, so this is our group UI. This is where you can see the different groups we have and devices that are a part of those groups. So like I said, when it comes to dynamic groups, those are relying on those filters. So for my East Coast Factory Network group, it's a very simple IP starts with filter, and it's going to look through all the IPs you have and make sure at least one of those matches this. If so, you'll join this group. Then I can either use this group for monitoring, so I can deploy a CPU monitor to everyone in this group. I can use it for software deployment, where I push an application, or I can use it for like profiles, where I push configurations to this group. We've already seen the software menu for the individual workstation. Just keep in mind the one for everyone else looks very similar. We're seeing all the software installed on machines. And when you're looking at it from like a full OS point of view, it kind of makes sense to just use the different filters and search stuff. So I can say Microsoft Edge here and pull up software easier that way. We can see who's got it installed. And we also can add some custom uninstall parameters and push our uninstall jobs from here as well. That'll just give you a quick way to remove software and actually patches too, which I think for Windows admins is pretty relevant, unfortunately. Same kind of logic here. You can quickly uninstall Windows patches on any number of endpoints, should you need to. Over on the services side, excuse me, again, very similar to what we saw before. We can come in here, mark as antivirus, and it's going to do that product-wide. Then when we open one of these services, we'll have the option of starting and stopping on individual machines here. Now let's cover how patching works. This is something I think we do really well. A lot of people come to our webinars and our demos to see patching. So I'm going to patch for Windows, but keep in mind this is cross-platform. You can even patch multiple platforms at once. I think Windows is just the most common one to kind of go through. So here we're seeing the patching page. It's going to load all the patches available to your endpoints. What that means is we're going to scan every machine, see what patches it has to install, and then we're going to report back to Bacon and build this table. So I can see the number of endpoints that need the patch. And so let's take a look at our security patch up here. This is all being pulled from, in this case, Windows Update. So you can see the name of the patch, KB number, the unique identifier. This can be handy if you're running in multiple language editions of Windows, where the name of the patch might be different, but the GUID itself is not localized, so you can use to match up which patches are which. And we can see categories, as well as a description provided forward this patch is, and then lastly, if it does or does not require a reboot. In this case, it does not. So let's look at how we'd actually patch some machines. To patch, we can select any number of patches here, pick these three, go up to Actions, and Install. The top table will show our patches. If it requires a reboot, we can see here 2 do, 1 does not. And then our endpoints, it's only going to show the endpoints that need at least one of these patches. So even though before we had multiple Windows endpoints, only these two need some combo of these patches. So we can select this endpoint. Let's go over our actual scheduling time. So we have install immediately. How this works is this is going to push it out to the endpoints in whatever state they're in. Unfortunately for this, looks like these two endpoints are offline, but it's going to bounce right off and not really retry because they're offline. So this is good for, I want everyone to get the patch right now, but not later. I'm just pushing out for this moment. So any online machines will get it, any offline machines will not. If I use the option Run When Connected, this allows me to run it on these machines right now, and then it's going to queue it for these ones that are offline that I've selected, so that they'll still get the patch, just not right now. It's next time they check in. Additionally, I have schedule time. This allows me to schedule a date and a time to push this patch out to the users. As well as I have relentless mode. This is a feature actually requested by one of our customers, and the goal here is to be able to install these patches that need a reboot without having the issue of Windows where you install a bunch of patches, it kind of fails for some of these, and you have to reboot and then rerun the job. There's a lot of babysitting there we can kind of automate our way out of. So here we're able to select a start date and an end date, like so, and like so. And Bacon's going to patch and reboot within this time frame until we either run out of patches or we exceed our time frame. That's our default setting here. In addition, we also have some options for being able to only reboot once after all patches are installed. So we'll do one pass and then reboot. Or maybe we just still need the time frame either because of our change management process, or maybe we have like a low bandwidth location and we want to do it while people aren't in the office. You can still use a time frame, and then you can choose not to reboot endpoints even if the patch installation fails. So here we'll install the patches, give it our best effort, but you won't have to worry about any automatic reboots during that time frame. So that's the main way patching works. It can also be triggered from the endpoints table, so it can be more of an endpoint-centric action where you're picking the machines you want to patch, and then it'll give you the patches that they share together. Again, same exact way we would patch, but now instead of picking our endpoints, we're picking the individual patches like so. In addition to how we patch, we also have some reporting features. So let's cover patch history. This allows you to see the patches that have been installed on machines and the patches that are available for machines, as we can see here. Again, I'll filter by Windows. And here we're able to see all the Windows patches available. We can see the patches that have previously been installed and the ones that are currently installed as well. Keep in mind, again, like with most tables in Bacon, these can be exported. So I can actually go to Actions and Export. That makes it super simple to get like a pivot table of the different patches we have available in our environment, which have actually been installed, which haven't been, and make auditing a much simpler task. In addition to that, we also have compliance. This allows you to see relatively how patched your machines are in comparison to others. And so here we're able to see what patches are applicable, as well as what patches have been installed and which have not been installed. So even though we're seeing 75% here, 83% here, once we look at the not installed, we're missing 39 patches on the one that's 83% patched, and 2 patches on the one that's 75% patched. So this gives you different indicators for which machines need your attention versus which do not. And again, this table can also be exported. Next up, let's cover our repository. Let's go to repository. We've already looked at the third-party patching, the managed package side. Let's look at the individual files. So here we can upload files to push out to machines. It can be super simple. Let's say we're pushing out like Global Protect, this MSI here. We drag and drop it down here, and it would upload into Bacon. We can go to the Actions menu and go to Deploy. This allows us to select our OS, so I'll pick Windows here. And then we have our MSI, and I want to choose Launcher. By default, this is just going to drop the file on the machine, and that might be what you want. If you want to update like a config file, push license files, or maybe push fonts to marketing, this is a great tool to grab those fonts, deploy them, and you're done. But in this case, I do want to actually have Windows launch this MSI for me. Next up, I'll choose my Windows devices. Then I have my installation location. This is where it's going to land whenever it's going to install. So in this case, it'll make the temp folder, it'll make the bacon folder. Then we have an option of what we want to run as, so either system or can specify user credentials. Then we have executable flags. So here I'll just do a qn, no restart, all users equals 1. Then we can deploy immediately, at a certain time, or when connected. This works exactly the same as that scheduling option in patching does. For more complex installations, we have our bundles feature. This allows you to select multiple files and then push them out together. So here I have my setup executable for Office 365. I have a configuration XML and a PowerShell script. One nice feature is I'm actually able to edit these plain text files in the Bacon UI as well. So that makes it much easier to iterate whenever you're working on stuff. So you can pull up a shell script here pretty easily. Even has syntax highlighting and controls your line endings. Next up, we have profiles and states. So when we started this, I kind of explained how states and profiles are similar to GPO, and then it allows you to achieve certain configurations, and we can push these out on a regular schedule and audit them. So if I wanted to disable all removable drive access, whoops, let me drag this back here, there we go. Disable all removable drive access as we see down here, I can do so. I can set this registry key and push this out to multiple devices. How this works is this state gets put into a profile, and then that profile gets applied or deployed to groups. So it makes it super simple to make these configurations for either setting registry keys, controlling services. We can have them install software. They can run scripts. A lot of complex logic can be easily automated here and then repeatedly pushed out. In addition to that, we also have tie-ins to our repository. So in the case of installing software, we can also load that software onto the machine from our repository and then push it out using this link here, which links back to a specific file in my repo. Once those jobs are in progress, we can go over to the log side of things. So on the system side, we're going to see all the activity I've been doing during the demo, right? This is pretty accountable, so we can see when machines come online, when jobs are running the system, when I'm doing stuff in the system. The individual jobs are logged here, and this is going to capture as much output as we can. So we can capture standard out, standard error, and even when our jobs aren't functioning, you'll see failed and what it's failed on. In this case, I think it's because most of these machines are offline. So let me do a quick filter here, and we'll grab some that have a completed status. So here I can see as an example, I was setting some wallpaper. So I'm going to use the LGPO for wallpaper. That's been configured, and the wallpaper is already on the machine in the file path I specified. So that's an example of we're pushing out a config. It's already in place, but we're able to audit this. We now know our config actually works. We don't have to go behind the system and double check the machine or write another script and push that out to check it. It's going to tell us exactly the kind of output we're looking for whenever it runs this job, and I think this one runs once a day. Over in schedules, we can see which profiles have been deployed, as well as which relentless patch jobs have been deployed, and either stop or start those from here. So this run now option allows me to run this outside of the normal interval where it refreshes. So let's say if I'm doing a machine deployment, I've got software that tries to install every 4 hours. Well, rather than waiting 4 hours, I can get Bacon on the machine, or let's say set of machines, then come here, click run now, and it's going to run it right away on all the machines it's been deployed to. Then lastly, in the admin tab, we've covered most of the newer features like SSO and stuff like that. We have different options for integration here. This is where we go to set up your different accounts as well as their role-based access control. So we can control what people are able to do in the system and then what groups they can influence with that access. So if I look at Bob Larry here, I can see that they have patch as a role in the East Coast Factory Network group. Remember, that's dynamic. So this group will keep itself up to date, so we don't have to come in and add the new machines for Bob Larry to work on. In addition to that, we also have the option of our help documentation built into the product. So here you're going to see the latest version of your Bacon documentation, whatever's available for you. This has a lot of different tables and examples of how to do various parts, as well as our support teams available to help you out. So under the support tab, we have a ticket submission built into the product. When you use this option, it sends us logs of your server as well, kind of helping the support team triage a little bit faster. As well as on the left-hand side, we have various ways to get support. So we have a Discord server. You're always welcome to join that. It is public. As well as we have those Bacon Bits videos we talked about earlier. We have our support email address, our Jira portal, and as well as we have script and state templates. So this allows you to see some example states as well as getting some support from our team to achieve different functions in Bacon. So John, that's mainly my overview. Is there anything I missed or anything you want to cover in more detail?
No, I thought you pretty much nailed it, Dave. I think the reality is that a lot of these features have really come together, and we didn't have a ton of questions today, but we did have one on WSUS, and I wanted to address that maybe. We can integrate with WSUS or replace it. So there are a few unique circumstances where WSUS, because it's a free tool, can be really valuable. Bacon, I think of it as sort of the much better director of patches, but as far as a repository or a holding bank, while you can hold updates in Bacon, it's not exactly the same way. It's more of a manual process to put them in there. So typically, because WSUS is free, we find that if you don't want to use Windows Update directly because you're in a dark site or something like that, we have some people doing that where they download individual security updates because that's all they need to kind of meet their requirements, and they just put them in Bacon. But we have other people, they want to kind of have all of the features at their availability, and they put Bacon and the WSUS. It's sort of a DMZ, and the thing most of us know about WSUS is it does a pretty good job downloading updates. It does a fairly mediocre job of actually deploying those updates. So we use WSUS just to download them and make them available to endpoints in sort of that system where those endpoints don't have access to the internet, but they do have access to the WSUS server, which is in the DMZ and always being scanned. And Bacon actually decides when and what gets installed on the machines. So I hope that answers that question. It's just it's not always the best way to use things anymore with WSUS. The idea of only downloading a patch once is not as relevant anymore because there's GPO settings to share bandwidth for updates. So we could talk more about that if that's interesting to you.
That's a good point.
The SSO also works with Okta, not just Azure AD. That's another question we had in there. I'm just
good point.
Putting that up there. It's just another one that got sent to everybody. And and there's another one in here. Well, these didn't show up before. What third-party patching are available? Well, the good news for you is that there's already a list of 100 or so common apps, but if you send us them, the way we built the system is that we can add in new apps extremely easily. So unless you send me an app that doesn't have a public repo or something like that, there's virtually no app we can't do. We built a special AI scraper that we can apply to any corporate repository, and then we have humans approve the resulting finds. So it's a great system because we can add apps in about 5 minutes. Not 5 minutes after you send them, but 5 minutes for us, so within a day or two. But then they're there permanently and always up to date. So hopefully, I think that's what you were asking in that question. All right, and I think I got the other one. Okay, I think that's all of them.
You got them.
So we got through the questions. If anybody didn't get a question answered, if I'm just misusing the technology here, do let us know. We'll be reaching out, of course, to see what you thought of the webinar and all those things, but mainly we would very much appreciate if you would fill out our survey so we can give you a t-shirt, and also because it helps us so very much. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. We'll give you the balance of the hour back. It should just take you a couple minutes to do this survey if you can do that for us. And we will catch up with you all soon. And thanks for checking out Bacon. Talk soon.